Before you start a new series, you check how it ends. Not because someone told you to, you just need to know. Before you begin a new project, you imagine the failure first. Before you text someone, you rehearse how they might not respond. Before you start anything, you've already played out the ending in your head. You might call yourself a planner, or realistic, or just someone who doesn't like surprises. But there's a word psychologists use for this pattern, and it isn't impatience. It's called intolerance of uncertainty. And it's one of the most underexplored drivers of anxiety in modern life. You're not watching the last episode first because you lack patience. You're doing it because your nervous system has decided that not knowing feels genuinely dangerous. And that changes everything about what this behavior actually is, and why it's so hard to simply stop. In the early 1990s, psychologist Michel Dugas began studying a pattern he kept noticing in anxious patients. They weren't just worried about specific things. They were worried about not knowing. He called it intolerance of uncertainty, the tendency to react negatively, emotionally, and behaviorally to uncertain situations, regardless of how likely a negative outcome actually is. That last part is important. It's not about the probability of something going wrong. It's about the discomfort of not knowing either way. People with high intolerance of uncertainty don't just fear bad outcomes. They fear the space between beginning and knowing. And they will do almost anything to collapse that space, to reach certainty as fast as possible, even if it means spoiling the story, even if it means ending the relationship in their head before it's had a chance to begin. Here's where it becomes something else entirely. Psychologists now understand that this isn't a character flaw, it's a protective mechanism. If you grew up in a home where things were unpredictable, where a parent's mood could change the atmosphere without warning, where good moments always carried the threat of something coming, your nervous system learned something very specific. It learned that uncertainty is a warning sign, that the space before knowing is the space where things go wrong. So it started scanning for endings, rehearsing them, preparing for them. Psychologists call this hypervigilance to outcomes. It's the same instinct that makes anxiously attached people analyze every message for signs of distance. The same instinct that makes someone memorize the exits before they've walked into the room. It worked once, in a childhood that needed it, and now the nervous system keeps using it, long after there's anything left to protect against. The behavior shows up in very specific, recognizable ways. You read the last chapter of a book first. You look up how a movie ends before you watch it. You ask, where's this going, early in a relationship? Not because you want to rush, but because the not knowing feels unbearable. You plan a trip, but struggle to enjoy the anticipation. You start a new job and immediately think about how it might end. You begin something creative and spend the first week imagining all the ways it might fail. None of this is laziness. None of it is lack of commitment. It's a nervous system that cannot rest until the outcome is known. And here's the painful part. It never quite gets what it needs, because life doesn't offer certainty. So the searching never fully stops. Research on intolerance of uncertainty consistently shows that it comes with a significant cost most people don't expect. Not just anxiety, not just the spoiled surprise. It costs presence. People with high IU spend significantly more mental energy anticipating outcomes than experiencing what's actually in front of them. They're already at the ending, even when the thing they're inside is still in its first pages. A relationship is an experience. A creative project is an experience. A conversation is an experience. And experiences only fully exist when you're inside them, not 3 steps ahead. Researcher Thomas Borkovic, who spent decades studying chronic worry, found something telling. People who worry persistently are almost always working from incomplete information about the future, and using that incompleteness as justification to stay on alert. The mind says, if I just knew, I could relax. But that's the trap, because certainty never arrives completely. So the mind keeps scanning. You check the ending of the series so you can enjoy watching without anxiety. But you watch with half your attention, because the other half is already somewhere else, already past it. The scanning was designed to protect you, but over time it becomes the thing that prevents you from fully inhabiting what you're trying to protect. So what actually shifts this? Dugas and his colleagues found that the most effective approach isn't reassurance. When you reassure someone who struggles with uncertainty, you temporarily lower the anxiety. But you reinforce the belief that uncertainty itself was the problem. What actually helps is something harder. It's called uncertainty exposure, deliberately staying with not knowing in lower stakes situations first, not watching the ending, not Googling the outcome, not asking how it goes, and noticing carefully, honestly, that the uncertainty itself didn't harm you, that you survived the open space, that your nervous system was wrong about the danger. This doesn't work all at once. It works gradually, through repeated experiences of surviving not knowing, building evidence slowly that the gap before knowing isn't where things fall apart. There's something else worth saying. People who need to know endings before they start are often extraordinarily perceptive. They read situations quickly. They see patterns others miss entirely. They're rarely caught completely off guard. These are real strengths. They're just in service of anxiety, rather than in service of living. The goal isn't to stop being perceptive. The goal is to give that perception somewhere to rest, to build enough tolerance for uncertainty that you can be fully present in the stories that are still being written. There is something about the world we live in now that makes this pattern significantly harder to resist. For most of human history, if you wanted to know how something ended, you had to wait. There was no other option. The book had to be finished. The movie had to play through. The relationship had to unfold. Now, there is almost nothing you cannot know in advance if you choose to look. You can read the plot summary before watching. You can search the diagnosis before the appointment. You can read every Reddit thread about how relationships like yours typically end. You can Google the outcome of the job interview process before you've even sent your application. And the mind that struggles with uncertainty experiences all of this as relief, as finally, a world that matches what it needs. But the relief is temporary, and what happens after it fades is more anxiety, not less. Because the seeking of certainty is itself a behavior that strengthens the belief that uncertainty is dangerous. Every time you look up the ending, you teach your nervous system that it was right to be afraid of not knowing. And so the threshold lowers. The next uncertainty feels even more intolerable. And the searching becomes the thing that feeds itself. Psychologists call this the reassurance trap. The more reassurance you seek, the more you need. Not because the world is becoming more uncertain, but because your tolerance for it is quietly shrinking. Intolerance of uncertainty shows up most painfully in relationships. Because relationships, by their nature, are radically unresolvable. You cannot know how they will end. You cannot audit the other person's feelings in advance. You cannot map the future of something that is still becoming. And so, for someone with high IU, a new relationship isn't just exciting. It's an ongoing source of threat. They ask, where is this going? Not because they want to rush, but because the not knowing is genuinely painful. They analyze silence, they read tone, they revisit every conversation looking for reassurance that it's still good. Researcher Sian McLean found that intolerance of uncertainty is one of the strongest predictors of relationship anxiety, stronger even than attachment style alone. People with high IU in relationships report lower satisfaction, higher conflict, and a persistent sense that the relationship is one misunderstood message away from ending. And here's the painful irony. The behaviors that come from needing certainty, the constant checking, the asking for reassurance, the need for clarity before it's time, often create exactly the distance they were trying to prevent. The person who keeps asking, "Are we okay?" is often not asking about the relationship. They're asking about something much older, something that was learned before they ever had a relationship to ask about. There is a paradox at the center of this pattern that's worth sitting with. The harder you work to eliminate uncertainty, the more uncertain you feel. Because the effort to control outcomes is itself a signal to the nervous system. There is something here that needs controlling. There is something here that is dangerous. The scanning says, I don't trust what will happen. And the more you scan, the more that distrust compounds. Acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by psychologist Stephen Hayes, offers a different frame entirely. The goal isn't to feel certain. The goal isn't even to reduce anxiety. The goal is to learn to move in the direction of what matters to you while the uncertainty is still there. Not after it resolves. Not once you know how it ends, while it's still open, while you still don't know. Because that is the only version of a life that is actually available. Everything else is a story you tell yourself about a future that doesn't exist yet. The conversation you're afraid of having, you don't know how it ends. The project you're afraid to start, you don't know how it ends. The relationship you're holding at arm's length, you don't know how it ends. None of us do. And somehow, most of the time, that has to be enough, including your own. Because here's what's true about needing to know the ending. Life doesn't have one you can look up. There is no last episode, no final chapter you can skip ahead to without missing everything in between. The story is the middle. All of it. The unresolved parts, the not yet known parts, the parts where you can't see how it goes. And those parts aren't the problem. They're where everything that matters actually happens. If you recognize this in yourself, it's worth asking quietly, what would it feel like to stay? Not to know, just to stay. To trust that you can meet what comes without needing to see it first. Leave something in the comments if this one found you. You're not the only one who's skipped to the last page. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology of things you feel but rarely name, subscribe. There's more here waiting for you.